Tonight on Greater Boston, Suffolk County DA Kevin Hayden joins me on how his office is responding to this week's unsolved shooting of a teacher and a student at Dorchester High School. Plus, how he plans to handle the ongoing case of Stephen Pena, who was recently let out of prison after 28 years for a murder he says he did not commit as a result of a push from Hayden's predecessor, Rachel Rollins. And later, Stevie Van Zandt has been the right-hand man to two legendary bosses, Bruce Springsteen and Tony Soprano. He joins me on that, his activism, and the future of rock and roll, all laid out in his memoir, Unrequited Infatuations. Before we dive in, you've heard a lot of criticism from me about how various leaders have handled the pandemic over the past couple of years. At the top of the list of exceptions is Dr. Ashish Jha, who we learned today is taking over as White House coronavirus coordinator. Most recently, he served as the dean of Brown University School of Public Health. Before that, he was head of Harvard's Global Health Institute. And of course, he's been a frequent guest here in Greater Boston since COVID hit, telling us as far back as April of 2020 what needed to happen in those early days when everything seemed to be going wrong.
If we had federal coordination, it would make a very big difference. I think it's just about leadership and management, and really at the most senior levels.
And with his senior leadership, we will all be better off for it. Closer to home, Suffolk County District Attorney Kevin Hayden was at Tech Boston Academy in Dorchester today, where students returned for the first time since a shooting there Tuesday night. The teacher and 17-year-old student who were wounded in the school parking lot as a group was gathering to board a bus for a basketball game are recovering. But as of this taping, there have been no arrests, frustrating family and friends who want answers and accountability from those responsible, and they want it now.
Stop causing so much hurt, so much pain, so much agony to the family members of not only the victims, but to your own family members.
The district attorney joins me now. Kevin Hayden, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
How you doing, Jim? Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. District Attorney, you described the shooting at Tech Boston as community terror. What did you mean by that?
Sure. This stuff is very personal. It touches close to home when we look at young kids in a school setting where they expect to be safe, engaged in community activity, going to cheer on their team. When something like this happens at the hands of people from outside that community, I'm not sure what else you call it. It's terrible. It's terror, and it has an extraordinary impact on our community.
Are you closing in on anybody?
No, it's still very much an active investigation.
You know, Kevin Hayden, I want to read to you something that's relevant to this that you said on the day of your swearing in January. You said, "I'm beginning a comprehensive review of all the gun cases pending in this office. Each one has the potential to cause great harm to our communities. The harm that guns cause is incalculable, and we must do everything in our power, use every tool at our disposal to reduce that harm." What are you doing about guns? I know you're fairly new to office. What are you doing?
Sure. So we've already begun a rapid indictment process for the gun cases that are currently in the system that need to be indicted. So we have added resources in terms of having 2 grand juries available to do this, and also 2 prosecutors specifically assigned to look at the gun cases that are the most serious and that need to be indicted. And we are moving through them through the system, our grand jury system, as quickly as possible. So we've indicted, in the past month alone, indicted 30 cases, done about 16 in the last 2 weeks. And we're doing that through that rapid indictment process.
And so this started about a month ago. Was that what you're saying?
That's correct, yeah.
And just so I'm 100% clear, you're putting extra person power, extra resources in, which allow you to turn over these cases, move these cases, to use your word, more rapidly than other offenses that you're prosecuting, correct?
That's correct. And we're also just using a process where we get these cases into the grand jury as quickly as possible, and using that process to do it.
Is this new to your office?
It's not new to me. It's how we're really employing a strategy that I know that we used in when I was in the gang unit, the Safe Neighborhood Initiative, to get these cases appropriately treated.
But I mean, in this generation, it is new to you. You're bringing this into the, it didn't exist is what I'm asking you during Rachel Rollins' term. This is something you initiated recently. Am I right about that?
That's
or no?
correct. Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of Rollins, can we move to another case, Kevin Hayden, if we can? Stephen Pina, who, in great part thanks to the Integrity Review Bureau from your predecessor, which is an initiated action that has gotten quite a few men, mostly of color, out of prison after having served decades in prison, most notably probably Sean Ellis. Most recently, a judge ordered the release after 28 years of that man, Stephen Pina. And the judge, in ordering the release, said that the police, Boston police and prosecutors, had withheld evidence pointing to another killer, had buried compromising evidence about key witnesses in order to hearing to determine if there should be a new trial. Will you support the defendant's request for a new trial?
I think we'll support whatever the judge finds in this matter. Any impropriety or improper conduct by either the police or the district attorney's office that took place in this case simply can't stand.
But it would seem to me that it would go a long way to ensuring that Mr. Pina got a new trial if it wasn't just the defense, but the prosecution who was determined that the evidence is such that a new trial is warranted. Would you contemplate getting to that place where you join with the defense team?
We would, and I know our integrity board is dealing with, review board is dealing with that. Yes.
Meaning it may happen.
It might, yes.
Just staying on this for a second, DA, if I can, the judge himself, even prior to hearing, I know you know this, said there is, quote, a fairly high likelihood that a new trial will be granted by him. Isn't that exactly the kind of situation where you would want to enter to help the pursuit of justice rather than being, for lack of a better expression, I don't mean this disrespectfully, a bystander to it, just waiting for a judge to make a determination?
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with that. Yes.
So finally, we should assume prior to that hearing, you may make a recommendation.
Well, I'm going to have to wait and see what the Integrity Review Board finally concludes. I don't know the answer to that question just yet, but yes.
So can we move to Monica Cannon Grant? As you know as well as anybody, I'm sure the audience knows, she's been on the show. She and her husband were arraigned for fraud, among other things. She's a community activist, head of something called Violence in Boston. And part of the fraud involved a grant that came from your office under your predecessor, $6,000 that was intended for street workers and at-risk youth, I think about 10 of them and 2 street workers, to go to a violence prevention retreat in Philadelphia. The money, according to the federal prosecutors, instead was used for going to a nail salon, buying groceries, going to hotels, that sort of thing. And obviously we understand these are only charges at this moment, obviously. One, was your office at all involved in this investigation? As I said, it's federal charges. And 2, what's your reaction to the charges in this case, particularly since money from your office, your predecessor, but your office is part of what's at issue here?
So it's a federal investigation. It's not one that we were directly involved with in any way. We did cooperate with the authorities with regards to requests for information regarding the funds that were received from our office, and fully cooperative with the feds on that. Anytime money is fraudulently obtained and used in a manner such as this, is just completely unacceptable.
Do you, I don't know if you read Adrian Walker in the Globe's piece on this, which I thought was spot on, where he talked about the fact that beyond obviously the impact on the work that organization was doing, I'm putting words in his mouth, but he basically says this, the trickle-down impact on other nonprofit community organizations, their ability to get grants. And by the way, this $6,000 was this much out of the whole pile that's alleged that was fraudulently used. Do you worry about what the impact of that might be on grants going to worthy organizations? And if you do worry, what can you as district attorney do about it?
Sure, absolutely. When something like this happens, it can tarnish the entire process. And other organizations that are doing great work and doing it legitimately, probably have some reason to have some concern. Now, that having been said, I don't think it's going to impact how we are going to be willing to disperse funds in the future to good and worthy organizations. It's important that there be a process involved, a process both before and after. So a process by which the grants are awarded and a process by which the report with regards to the use of those funds is then properly provided back to the agency that has granted those awards. In this case, it would have been us.
Very quickly, we only have 30 seconds left. As you made clear, this is a federal investigation in which you weren't involved. Was there a reason why this was not initiated by your office?
Honestly, Jim, I don't think we knew about it. I think our first awareness of it, and this happened previously before I even arrived here, we didn't know about it until the federal authorities made us aware of their investigation and asked for information.
Kevin Hayden, as always, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Good to see you.
You may know my next guest as the right-hand man to the boss, on and off for more than a few decades.
On the guitar, Miami Stevie Van Zandt.
Or maybe when he played the right-hand man to another boss on a little HBO show. Yeah, that one. Over his decades-long career, Stevie Van Zandt has also used his platform to protest the South African apartheid in 1985 with a song he wrote, produced, and gathered dozens of music legends to sing. It's called Sun City. He created the Teach Rock Foundation in an effort to make the arts a core part of public education. And these days, you can see him as ex-gangster Frank Tagliano and Netflix's Lilyhammer, or hear him on one of his SiriusXM channels, including the latest Little Steven's coolest songs in the world, or read about what it's like to be one of the coolest guys in the world, at least in my opinion, in his memoir, Unrequited Infatuations. Stevie Van Zandt recently joined me. Stevie Van Zandt, it's great to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Jim.
So everybody knows you're a Jersey kid. I don't think most people know you're a Jersey kid by way of Watertown. Do you want to share all your favorite memories of Watertown, Stevie?
Well, unfortunately, it's a short list because I was gone by 7 or so. I talk about it in the book a little bit. All I remember is my grandfather taking me down to the Italian section of town, where they still had push carts, you know, like in Godfather 2. And you know, I just remember lots of snow.
Well, you missed out on the Watertown Diner, but maybe next time you're here. So should I be embarrassed that until I read your book this weekend, it never occurred to me that your relationship to Springsteen and to Tony Soprano is incredibly similar? Should I be embarrassed? I am right?
Well, it just kind of evolved that way. I mean, we didn't think of it either, so no reason to be embarrassed. I didn't think of it, and David Chase didn't really think of it. As I talk about, he cast me originally as Tony Soprano, and when HBO said, "Are you out of your mind?" You know, this guy has never acted before, and this is a really big deal to us. So anyway, we ended up, coming up with running the strip club for the family, and ended up being very similar to that, kind of, best friend, consigliere type of, advisor role, which I was playing to some extent with Bruce Springsteen my whole life. Yeah.
You know, when I was looking at your resume, it's really unbelievable. Sopranos, E Street, Lilyhammer, Disciples of Soul, anti-apartheid work, music education in schools, SiriusXM. So I didn't know what to focus on. So I reached out to consult with a local guy who says he met you at what he called a small mob club in Jersey called the Sunshine Inn. Do you know who that might have been? Peter Wolf.
I don't know.
Peter Wolf. He said you and Springsteen show up at this mob club, as he calls it. So here's what Peter Wolf said I should ask you about, so I'll follow Peter's instruction. He said, first of all, he said, you've done as much to promote new artists, particularly with the Sirius XM stuff, as anybody he knows. Why does that matter so much to you, and how successful do you think you've been?
Well, the job for the last 20 years has been trying to keep this endangered species called rock and roll just alive in any way possible. Rock and soul, really. So I literally dedicated the last couple decades between the radio station. I now have 3 on Sirius Satellite, and the record company, and the publishing companies, and even the school founded. The curriculum, is based on keeping the Renaissance, what I call the Renaissance period, accessible for future generations. The Renaissance period being, roughly 50s, 60s, and 70s. Everybody can measure it their own way, but those 3 decades will inform the public, continues to inform our entertainment world, and I think we'll continue to do so until they invent new instruments. So I realized that we're no longer mainstream as far as rock and roll goes. We have been returned to the cult where we started, in 1954, 55. And maybe that's where we belong. I think the fact that we were mainstream for those decades, I think, may have been an anomaly, of history. But the truth is, we're back in a pop era now. I clocked the rock era from Like a Rolling Stone, 65, to Kurt Cobain's death in 94. That 30-year period, it was really a rock era coming out of this Renaissance period, where the greatest art being made was also the most commercial. Yeah. And I just think my whole mission is to try and keep that accessible for future generations. And so we, on the radio show, we have introduced over 1,000 new bands, 1,000. Now, do they break through? Unlikely. But the fact that they don't have a reward at the end of this rainbow, it makes you want to support them even more, And so we're hoping that, to try and recreate an infrastructure that can support a rock and roll world, even on a lower, subsistence level, as long as it continues to exist.
One other mission of yours, Stevie, that Peter Wolf mentioned to me was something you talk a lot about in the book, this anti-apartheid work and pulling together, 50 superstars from Dylan to Bonnie Raitt to Miles Davis. And it seems to me, having read your book, if you put together a resume and put the thing that mattered most to you at the top, I sort of get the sense that Sun City would be right up there. Is that fair?
Yes, that'll be the most important thing I would do politically, for sure. But I think a couple of things hopefully will outlive me. I think my radio formats, I believe, will outlive me. I think they're extremely important, and I think the curriculum will outlive me also. So I think in some ways those things are more important, really, in the bigger sense.
When you say outlive you, wait, when you say outlive you, you're not going anywhere, are you? That we don't know about, or no?
No.
Okay,
no.
I want to be clear.
I might go around the corner to the deli, but that's about it. No.
Can you talk about that teach thing for a second? I've read you say you want to add an A, convert STEM to STEAM, the A being arts. This rock and roll curriculum is being taught by thousands, if not tens of thousands of teachers in schools around the country, isn't it?
Yeah, we're in the tens of thousands at this point, somewhere around 40,000. And I didn't get a recent count of the lesson plans, but it's got to be around 300 by now, online for free, teachrock.org. And we wanted to do something that was easy, accessible for teachers, and free, and we wanted to be the hip class. We wanted to be the class that the kids look forward to. The statistics show that if a kid likes one single class or one single teacher, they'll come to school. Yeah. And we really, really want to, eventually, we want to affect the dropout rate, which is just an absolute embarrassment. it's close to 50% in the poor neighborhoods, and that's just not acceptable. And 50% of those kids end up in the criminal justice system sooner or later. So that's just not tolerable. So we want to affect that, and we want to, as you said, keep the arts in the DNA of the public education system.
Great.
STEM, which you mentioned, science, technology, engineering, and math, has been the focus. And we feel extremely strongly that an A for the arts belongs in that equation, not as some kind of extra after school thing either. As a literally not only a part of the school main school day, but actually integrated into the other disciplines. We want to put the arts into science, into math, into engineering, not as a separate thing. And that is where things start to become transformed and a little bit more easier to digest for young kids.
Couldn't agree more. The pride of Middletown High School, Stevie Van Zandt. So how are you a good student or no?
The worst.
The worst.
I actually got kicked. I got kicked out of high school actually, and I felt bad for my mother, so I went back and eventually graduated. But I was just the worst.
That Van Zandt kid will never make anything of himself either. I think they said that in those days, didn't they?
I'm sure that's, yeah.
One more Peter Wolf reference. You mentioned Peter's in your book a lot. Now he's a good buddy of yours. You write
Yes.
that he sort of tipped the scales on you deciding to do this acting thing you haven't done. The great line from him is you guys are out at dinner and he says, don't overthink it. If it bombs, it bombs. Nobody will care. Was that like a pivotal moment in your decision making?
Yeah, because I had a lot of friends. I got I don't know, half a dozen consiglieres that I listened to, and a lot of them were adamantly opposed to it. Some of my best friends were like, you can't do that. That's you're a rock and roll guy. You have all this rock and roll credibility. It's gonna go right out the window if you start, you act in some stupid TV show, But Peter was like, don't worry about it. And he started listing all of these people that had TV shows. Did you know Steve McQueen had a show? Did you know this one had a show? That one had a show. So eventually I said, well, all right, and he did tip the scales.
Speaking of tipping the scale, the Rolling Stones, who I know were an inspiration to you, I think are going to be performing into their 80s. You and Springsteen, young 70s. Can you see doing what you do and Springsteen doing what he does as 80-year-olds on a stage?
Yeah, you can imagine it. I mean, it's a little bit weird, okay, and I freely acknowledge it. Our generation seems to be changing the very concept of chronological time.
Thank goodness.
I mean, really. We changed the idea of a job being a drag. Our generation was sort of like, you mean we can have a job and enjoy it too? And that alone was kind of a new idea. The concept of liking your job so much that you didn't really, I don't take vacations. I took a vacation in 1978, and I didn't like it. But there's just you don't think about that, as past generations have, where you're working to live. We kind of live to work. I don't know. The identity of you are what you do, at least in our world. You know what I mean?
Well, especially if you make yourself happy and make other people happy doing what you love doing too. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a quote from your book. You wrote, contrary to popular scientific rumor, the Big Bang that gave birth to the universe did not happen 10 million years ago. It happened on February 9th, 1964. What happened on February 9th, 1964? I guess you were a 14-year-old little kid. What happened?
Yeah, I was 13 actually, and there was a Sunday night variety show hosted by the most unlikely of characters named Ed Sullivan, who, like I said, you could picture Richard III like on LSD. The entire family would gather around the one TV in the house. And he'd have something for every generation. You know, he got puppets for the little kids and opera for the older people and something for the teenagers. And something for the teenagers, February 9, 1964, was a group called the Beatles, who he had kind of discovered at an airport, supposedly. At that point, I was introduced to the concept of a band, you know, and I'd never really seen a band before. The idea of 4 or 5 guys, you know, singing and playing, and that was a new idea. And suddenly America and probably the rest of the Western world became a band culture overnight. Yeah. After that, not only did everybody have a band in their garage the next day, but when you went out at night, whether you were with a musician or not, you either went to the movies, you went to the drive-in, or you went to see a band. I mean, that's just what everybody started doing all of a sudden. And that wasn't the case really before that. If you went to your high school dance, it would be an instrumental group, you know. So it was really a change in the culture in many ways, but certainly completely changed my world. And then to complete the picture, the Rolling Stones came 4 months later, and they just made it look a little bit more accessible, made it look a little easier than it was. You know? So
before you go, complete the loop. That band on February 9th, 1964, one of the members was Paul McCartney. What was it like for that 13-year-old little boy, decades later, to have Paul McCartney play with him?
Yeah, it was miraculous, you know. We had a couple of you know, he'd come on stage with the E Street Band at Hyde Park, which was thrilling. And then he invited me and Bruce on stage with him at Madison Square Garden, which was thrilling. But to come on my stage with the Disciples of Soul, my band, and have the faith to walk on with no rehearsal, no idea what we were going to do, you know, that said a lot to me. And it was just an incredible endorsement and really, you know, justified my entire existence as far as I was concerned. It was you know, certainly, easily one of the high points of my life.
Well, I keep hoping you have many more high points. Stevie Van Zandt, it's great to meet you. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
You too, my friend. Say hi to Peter for me.
The book again is Unrequited Infatuations. My thanks to Peter Wolf for the interview guidance and to Larry Multer for making the Van Zandt connection for us. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. With inflation and gas prices way up, Massachusetts residents are feeling it in their pockets, but efforts to alleviate some of that financial burden are dead on Beacon Hill. What are our elected officials doing to help the strain? Plus, should politicians be deciding whether people return to their offices? That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe.
New dawn.
New vibe.
New duo.
I'm looking forward to that, yeah.
Join me, Paris Alston.
And me, Jeremy Siegel.
For GBH's Morning Edition, with the local news and fresh insights you need.
To start your morning and inspire your day.
You know, you gotta live life on the edge a little bit. We're here weekdays from 5 to 10 on 89.7 and gbhnews.org.
All right,
we got it. Let's go. It's a new dawn.
See you in the morning.